This is the story of Grandpa Joheun. Before North Korea and South Korea came into existence, Korea was one country. A salesman named Joheun lived in the northern part of Korea. He lived with his wife Uni and their 6 children. They had 3 girls and 3 boys. Their eldest daughter, Kanoan, was a nurse, and their youngest child, Egi, was a baby boy. They lived in a city called Suncheon. Joheun walked around and sold small things such as glasses, pencils, and belts. Though he was not rich, he made enough money to feed his large family. Joheun went to a place where many men gathered. Every night, the men gathered to listen to representatives of Kim Il-sung. One night, a representative of Kim Il-sung asked Joheun if he would worship Kim Il-sung. Joheun said no. On a side note, Kim Il-sung later became the dictator of North Korea, and he is the deceased grandfather of Kim Jong-un. As many of you know, Kim Jong-un is the current dictator of North Korea. After the meeting, Joheun went home to his family and they went to sleep. However, there were loud bangs on Joheun's door. Joheun woke up and he opened his front door. Salyo, a friend and relative of Joheun, came to tell Joheun that he was in great danger. "People are plotting to kill you," said Salyo. "You need to leave your home now," he said. Joheun was surprised, but he knew Salyo was serious, so he woke up his wife and children and he told them they had to leave their home. Joheun and his family left their home in the night, and they met with their friend and relative Doaja. Doaja was a high-ranking police officer. Joheun explained his situation to Doaja, and he told him that he needed to get to the city of Seoul as quickly as possible. Seoul was far away from where they lived, but Joheun had some relatives in Seoul. Doaja took Joheun and his family to a train that transported coal. He told the coal workers to leave some space for Joheun and his family to get on the train. It was illegal for people to ride the coal train, but Doaja knew that Joheun's life was in great danger and he wanted to help him and his family, even if it meant breaking the laws. Joheun and his family got on the coal train, but eventually the train came to a stop and they secretly got off the train. Then they walked and walked and walked until they saw a river called the Imjin River. A man who owned a boat was standing near the river. Joheun asked the man if he could take him and his family across the river. The man said he would do so only if Joheun paid him. Joheun paid the man and they traveled across the river. Then Joheun met a man who was a travel guide. He asked the travel guide to take him and his family to Seoul. The guide said he would do so only if Joheun paid him money. Joheun paid the guide and they traveled to Seoul. Finally, Joheun and his family arrived at the house of Joheun's relatives, which was in Seoul. It seemed like Joheun's family had nothing to worry about. But the next day, Joheun's youngest child, Egi, was dead. This was heartbreaking news to everyone in the home. Even though Egi survived the long journey across many hills, many forests, and a large river, he died not long after the family arrived at their destination. The relatives of Joheun said he and his family had to leave their home, so Joheun and his family went to a place where people lived in tents. They bought their own tent and they lived in it for a certain period. Though Joheun didn't have much, he was determined to be a better provider for his family. Kanoan, the oldest child, got a job as a nurse, and Joheun got a job selling clothing dyes. People bought his dyes and they dyed their clothes. At some point, Joheun and his family left their tent and they moved into a small house. Everything seemed to be going well for Joheun and his family. In 1948, Korea became divided into North Korea and South Korea. At that point, Kim Il-sung was the dictator of North Korea, but he wanted to rule all of Korea. So, in 1950, he sent his soldiers to South Korea. This was the beginning of the Korean War. The North Korean soldiers attacked and killed many South Koreans, but they mostly targeted South Korean men. They wanted to take the South Korean men to North Korea, but if the men refused or fought back, they were killed. Because the soldiers went into the houses of South Koreans to kidnap South Korean men, Joheun had to hide. Outside of their home, there was a drain. Joheun opened up the drain cover and he went inside the sewer. There was no feces and urine in the sewer, but because the water was used to clean people, dishes, cups, clothes, and other things, the water was pretty dirty. Joheun hid in the sewer for several months. He was able to survive because his wife Uni regularly sent him some food and water. He sat on top of of a piece of wood that he brought in because he didn't want to get wet. He was not able to stand because the sewer was small, and he could see very little because it was dark. At some point, Uni told Joheun to get out of the sewer. She said there were no North Korean soldiers around, and she heard that everyone was going to the city of Busan for safety. So Joheun cleaned himself up, and he and his family traveled to Busan. The distance between Seoul and Busan is over 300 kilometers. It was too far to get to Busan in a single day. Joheun and his family took several days or weeks to get to Busan. Along the way, they stayed in abandoned homes and they ate the food in the abandoned homes. However, there was little to no food in the homes. At some point, the violence between North Korea and South Korea ended, at least to a large extent, and people could go back home. Ganoon went back to working as a nurse, but Joheun became a realtor and he sold groceries in his home. Finally, Joheun and his family could live in peace. When Joheun learned that people were going to kill him because he rejected their leader Kim Il-sung, he was afraid for his life, so he ran away to the south. But this turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The people who stayed in the north became trapped when Korea became divided into two countries, and now many of them are struggling to survive. Joheun and Uni decided to have another child together. They had a baby boy. 3 years later, they had one more child together. Their last child was a baby girl named Sarang. Sarang is my mother. If you like spirituality, science, art, or animals, then be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget to turn on the notification bell.